Hello everyone, and welcome to this week's Motor Trade Radio podcast. Powered by Motors, the driving force behind multi-site advertising. With Philip Nothard and Curtis Hutchinson, bringing you all the chatter that matters.
Well, Philip, you've been out in the real world, haven't you? Because you were at Car Dealer Live last week. How was it?
I was, yeah. It was a long day because I had a Barclays Bank dealer dinner afterwards. But no, it was a fantastic event. It was great to catch up. Saw a lot of people that I think it was probably refreshing for them that see that I actually do exist below my head and shoulders off a Teams call, and plenty of hugs and handshakes and catching up, and my voice was
a rare outing for you, Philip.
It was very good. We had James Brearley, who we've had on the podcast. He was on the couch with me on my session. But no, it was a great event, great turnout. Very much a lot of dealers to catch up with, and it was a long, brilliant day.
And you met up with friend of the pod, and I think he still listens, Dash Gupta.
I did.
Marshall Motors. How's Dash?
Very well. Very busy. I think if you want to get lunch with him, you're looking at the end of May at the minute. His diary is that busy. He turned up for his session, and I'm sure we'll talk about it shortly, but he had a wellbeing and mental health session with his role within Ben still. With Rachel Cliff, who we know is the new CEO of Ben. So no, we had a brief catch-up, a brief hug and a brief hello as he kind of came in for his session and very quickly disappeared off afterwards. But it was great to see him in person because it's been far too long. And we had a bit of a CEO Motor Trade Radio podcast get-together as well. You'll be glad to know there was James Brearley, John O'Hanlon was there, Peter Smythe. We're all getting together and having a chat, and Stephen Whitton, mental wealth guru, was there as well. So yeah, it was a bit of a industry get together as well as a Motor Trade Radio podcast get together.
Yeah, brilliant. And talking of industry get-togethers, AM announced the shortlist for the AM Awards this week. Yep. So we've got a few of the finalists to give shout outs to. So just looking at some of the dealers shortlisted rather. So online consumer experience of the year, we've got Luscombe's, Pentagon Motor Group, Truss Ford. Workshop of the year, Group 1 Automotive, Hills Ford. In and Out Auto Centres, love the name, Perry's East Midlands and Wayland's Volvo Oxford. And Independent Dealer of the Year on the shortlist is MB Motors, Motoroo Cars and Ponco.
Yeah, and looking at a few of the other categories on part two, interesting customer service champion goes Robin Luscombe again, and Luscombe leads there in the shortlist there alongside MB Motors, Motoroo and Ponco. We get a bit of repetition here, Curtis. Franchise Dealer of the Year is Mantles Kia, which is part of the Granger Motor Group. You've got Perry's Motor Sales in Dover Ford, Roadside Garages, Stephen Eagles, Lexus in Ipswich there, and Wayland's Volvo down in Reading. So a good list of people.
Yeah, very good list, good short list there, and we wish everyone well. The awards themselves are on May the 1st at London's Park Plaza, Westminster Bridge Hotel. So that we'll be hearing plenty more about this on the sort of lead up to that event.
Yeah, and coming up next week, we've got our CAP HPI midweek special interview there with, I presume it's going to be Jeremy Yeh, who will be talking us through a crucial month of the year in terms of what's happened in March around used car value trends. And I'm sure we'll pose a few questions of obviously what he's seen in the first sort of quarter of the year through January, February and March, and more importantly, try and tease out of him what he sees happening now as we move into this second quarter of 2025.
I can't believe we're talking about the end of March
Right,
already.
yeah.
I'm only just starting to see some 25 plates on the road, so it still feels like early March to me.
The Easter eggs will be out, and then it'll be
Yeah.
Christmas decorations, Curtis. Watch out for that one.
You're listening to the Motor Trade Radio podcast, powered by Motors.
Headlines this week come from AM, Car Dealer, Motor Trader and Motor Trade News, starting with automotive consumers more disloyal than ever as new brands make their mark, according to research from Google. Bumper identifies affordability of repair work for customers as the biggest challenge faced by service advisors. And staying with after sales, workshop managers share concerns over potential MOT recall rule change. Then, after the break, we'll look at Close Brothers, who have posted a £100 million loss as lender looks to slash costs amid car finance crisis. And we'll finish off with a look at Audi, who are delaying the end of petrol car production amid financial and market pressures.
You're listening to all the chatter that matters on the Motor Trade Radio podcast. If you're a supplier and would like us to profile your business and reach our audience of dealer bosses, managers and decision makers on one of our dedicated supplier specials episodes, get in touch with Curtis and Philip at motortraderadio@yahoo.com.
Yeah, we've had a lot of interest in these supplier specials, and companies already featured include the likes of Tracker, MTC, Jigcar, Checkwick, Car Care and Auto Chat. So if you would like us to profile your business, then just get in touch with Phil or myself. We're both on LinkedIn.
Yeah, exactly. And it's, as you said a bit earlier, Curtis, it's only the end of March and there's a whole year to go yet. So look forward to hearing from you. But we'll head over to the headlines first. As Curtis said, they're heading over to Car Dealer magazine, and this is something that came from the Car Dealer live event last week. And automotive consumers more disloyal than ever as new brands make their mark. And this has come from research from Google data that reveals the collapse in brand loyalty amongst car buyers, saying that 3/4 of drivers are now switching manufacturer when they buy a new car. And data shows that buyers are far more interested in price and finance over the brand itself. So quite an interesting statement there, isn't it, coming from Google and what they've researched.
Yeah, this looks as though it was a particularly good session, and representing Google was Mohammed Lone, who is the omni-channel strategist for Google. And speaking at the Car Dealer Live, he was asked about what impact the influx of new Chinese brands had on consumer behavior. And the Google research that he's drawing from said that brand loyalty has been disappearing since 2019. So that's where Google have tracked it back to, with customers generally considering as many as 7 manufacturers now compared to just 3 last year. So that's a hell of a change in just 12 months. But it does reflect this influx of new brands, mostly Chinese brands, that have come into the UK, doesn't it?
Yeah, I mean, that's a big number, isn't it? 75% of customers now switch brands when changing their cars. And it does question, doesn't it, this? Because we do, one of the questions around the new Chinese brands is that brand strength.
Yeah.
Because consumers have always been so brand loyal, but this is turning that on its head a little bit, sort of saying that they're asking it what are the best SUVs rather than what are the best Vauxhall or VWs, for example, was stated in the press release there. So very interesting findings and probably quite encouraging for the new entrant brands versus the legacy brands who obviously have been operating in the brand loyalty space and relying on that.
Yeah, definitely. And Mohammed Lone did actually shed some light on what typical searches are on Google. So says that trends that we have been seeing since 2019 show generic searches constantly rising. So people not necessarily looking for specific brands, but asking questions within Google about the overall market. So, and this, what an example that he cites is that they're asking what are the best SUVs rather than what are the best Vauxhalls or VWs. So it really does show that shift away from brand loyalty, amongst car buyers.
Yeah, and a final comment in the release there is consumers are more disloyal in many ways than ever. They're more open to being convinced by new brands, and that's why the Chinese brands and the non-traditional OEMs are well, and they're getting reaction from and getting traction in the market there. So, consumer behaviours and really, as I said earlier, the brand loyalty is playing into these new entrants, these new Chinese brands, and from other markets into the UK consumer at the minute.
Our next story comes from Motor Trader, and the headline is Cost of Repairs, Biggest Challenge for Service Advisors. So this is some research carried out by Bumper for their forthcoming Automotive After Sales report, which looks at trends over the course of the last 12 months. Now, I actually worked with the guys at Bumper on this release, and I've seen the data, and this particular part of the research is in itself fascinating, because what they've done is they've polled service advisors. So for a lot of the reports, they're actually polling the views of end users, customers, but this is specifically service advisors. So they've got a sample of 520 service advisors, and they found that a quarter of them cited affordability of repairs for customers as their main challenge. And that really underscores the financial pressures on consumers due to the increased cost of living and rising parts prices. And the story goes on to say that customer expectations was the next biggest challenge, with 18% of service advisors signaling that growing demand for high quality service and personalized experiences, while parts availability was a concern for 12% as service advisors grapple with supply chain issues. So an interesting piece of research here, because as I say, it's really showing what's happening at the sharp end, and what's on the minds of service advisors and how they're interacting with customers and the issues that they're identifying.
No, you're right there. I mean, obviously, the one stat that does jump out is saying that 58% reported observing changes in customer preferences or behaviours in after sales services compared to previous years. Now, obviously, working in the dealer space previously, these customer advisors probably see the most people in a showroom
Yeah.
any day, speak to most people and physically see the most people, and it's a very taxing, very busy job that they have, and say trying to keep ahead of some of these consumer demands, expectations, and changing behaviours is a big job for them at the minute. And there is a final statement here from Daniel Christie, who's head of sales at Bumper, saying that service advisors are a unique position to observe the behaviour changes of after sales customers, with our research highlighting the impact that servicing and repair costs are having across the sector. So something that we've kind of touched on a couple of times before, but that change in cost of living is playing directly into that service area in the aftermarket place.
And staying with after sales for the next story from AM Online, and it's workshop managers share concerns over potential MOT recall rule change. So this particular story has been sort of kicking around the industry for a little while, and it's whether or not manufacturer recalls will be included with MOTs. And there's certainly a suggestion within this story that that's closer to being resolved and closer to being included in MOTs. So workshop managers have expressed concern over the potential rule change that would introduce an advisory or automatic MOT failure for unresolved recalls. And the findings come from a MOT Juice survey, and it's based on opinions of just over 200 MOT testers and workshop managers. And it shows that just over 2/3 are unaware of the potential change, whilst almost half of the respondents said their workshops were not prepared to handle what would be a surge in recall-related repairs, while 35% said they were somewhat prepared, with only 18% feeling very prepared. So it kind of identifies the challenges that are facing the MOT sector, whether it be franchise dealers, MOT bays, or in independent garages.
Yeah, and I think that the key with this is obviously, what recalls will determine a failure of an MOT. That's going to be the one, because the recalls can be sometimes very vague, and a very Arian again worked in the sector. There's a lot of recalls on cars. Sometimes I would suggest not necessarily that sometimes for a revenue opportunity more than anything else, should I say. I think that's because you're going to get the customers back into your
yes,
your workshop. And
Yep.
And I suppose the other half of this is, if the MOT centres are dealing with recalls, then does that then impact your dealer operator that normally would handle recalls away from, if they don't do MOTs, and just focus on servicing, then is this removing that from them? But I suppose it's them to do the recalls rather than identify the recalls. But it's an interesting one, this one, and it was saying that that the plans to begin linking MOT outcomes to vehicle recalls was first announced back in 2019. Saying that Neil Barlow is the DVSA and head of MOT policy, stating that the DVSA will work with the DFT, the Department for Transport, to determine how the MOT system can be adjusted to cover outstanding safety recalls in the future. And I suppose that's the thing with it. I mean, I've got a recall at the minute for my BMW, and one side of Sport 2 saying it's nothing major, it's probably not a problem, but it is airbag related, and the slim chance that it is a problem and it does affect the airbag, then automatically it's a safety issue, isn't it, by default?
Yep.
And I suspect that if that was in the new world, then it would probably fail an MOT based on that. So, yeah, interesting changes, and kind of one that's been kept below the radar a little bit, hasn't it, until now? It's not really been spoke about in great detail.
Yeah, and that's really reflected in the research, where the awareness amongst workshop managers is surprisingly low.
Yeah, exactly. But we'll be back after this short break.
You're listening to All the Chatter That Matters on a special weekday episode of Motor Trade Radio, powered by Motors, the driving force behind multi-site advertising.
So heading over back to car dealer again, and this is that Close Brothers posts a £100 million loss as lender looks to slash costs amid car finance crisis. And this is obviously saying that the Close Brothers swings to loss on motor finance scandal of hit. Lender post statutory pre-tax loss of 103.8 million for the 6 months to January the 31st of this year, and that job loss is set to follow throughout the rest of the year. Now, obviously, they've referred to it as the scandal, but obviously this is the discretionary commission situation with the High Court that we know is in the Supreme Court on the the first of starting on the 1st of April. And obviously with this, there's been the potential of the redress within it. But at the time, Close Brothers are one of the defendants with this, and they did get hit pretty hard in terms of their shares, didn't they, at the time?
Yeah, they did. And this story is based on the half-year results that were announced during the week, which found that, as you said, Close Brothers made a statutory pre-tax loss of £103.8 million. And that's the year up to January. And profits of £87 million reported this time last year. So following the news that shares in the company slumped by 14%, that was immediately after publication. And it comes after Close Brothers last month put aside £165 million to deal with the car finance crisis ahead of its Supreme Court ruling, which is next month. And we've been tracking very closely on the podcast over recent months. But the firm added that half-year results were also impacted by £8.4 million for complaints, handling and other operational and legal costs linked to motor finance commissions. So you can really see the impact that this is having on its day-to-day business.
Yeah, there is a quote in the release from the newly appointed chief executive Mike Morgan, who took on the role back in January of this year, saying that despite the short-term impacts of the motor finance commission uncertainty on our financial performance, our core banking model remains resilient, and that they will continue to deliver robust underlying profit to their in their banking business. So, basically just putting context into it. I mean, obviously there is the FCA came out with their position last week, didn't they, on the pending potential results from the Supreme Court finding. So I think the view at the minute is there will be a staged output for this. There'll be a controlled redress process, but it's obviously at what cost in the meantime for these multi-division lenders in the sector.
Yeah, definitely. And in the meantime, Close Brothers is aiming to cut costs by around £25 million over the course of the financial year. And that's up from a previous target of £20 million. So it has raised that. And the car dealer story does say that this is expected to include job losses, with the firm saying it has made good progress on streamlining the workforce through the consolidation of roles across the business. So more to play out in this story, I think.
Yeah. And finally for today, heading over to Motor Trade news. And this is that Audi delays end of petrol car production amid financial and market pressures, saying that Audi is reconsidering its plan to launch its final petrol-powered model in 2026 as financial pressure and market conditions prompt a review of its transition to a electric mobility. But I think, we were talking before, weren't we, that this is you need to read the story, don't you, to get the true narrative behind it, because they do talk about Audi has reported a revenue of 64.5 billion for the 2024 financial year, and that's down 7.6 with an operating profit of 3.9 billion and a 6% operating margin, and saying that deliveries fell 11.8% to 1.67 million units, including 164,000 fully electric vehicles, which also saw a 7.8% decline. And this is obviously saying that it reflects the challenging economic environment intensified by global competition and production adjustments for the new model launches. But you and I were talking, because there's hybrid involved with this, isn't there, as well? It's not quite just pure petrol that they're talking about here.
Yeah, that's right, because Audi had previously said that it would phase out its last petrol model in 2026 before transitioning entirely to electric vehicles. But it looks as though what they will be doing is they will retain plug-in hybrid production. So I think that's where the petrol element comes into it, in the headlines. So it will continue with plug-in hybrid production and launching new models, building models. And within the story, it says the company will introduce over 20 new models by the end of 2025, which
that's not slowing down, is it?
No, which is just extraordinary. And so 20 new models by the end of this year, half of those will be fully electric. And that includes some of the key launches like the A6 Advance, the Q3, as well as expanding the plug-in hybrids range with 10 new plug-in hybrids expected by the end of 2025. So yes, it is retaining that petrol element, but really focusing in on plug-in hybrids.
Yeah, so I think there is a lot going on, and particularly a lot going on for that brand in the marketplace, and with all the tariffs and the challenges around the transition to electrification. So positively, it's great to see them making these fairly swift adjustments, aren't they, to reflect the current market and the current challenges that they face. So busy week again there, Curtis, and lots going on. So as I say, best of luck to everybody involved with the AM awards. Great even to just be shortlisted and nominated is a great result, and have a fantastic evening, and good luck to everybody at that event. It's a busy quarter, isn't it, for awards and events, Curtis?
It certainly is, yes. But you know what? That's all for now. So many thanks for joining us on the Motor Trade Radio podcast. Do watch out for our standalone episodes over the course of the week, where we'll be talking to Cap HPI about March's valuation trends. But until then, it's goodbye from me.
And it's goodbye from him.
Thank you for listening to this special weekday Motor Trade Radio podcast. Powered by Motors, the driving force behind multi-site advertising. Philip and Curtis will be back with the week's big motor retailing headlines on Saturday. Live, on demand, wherever you are, on your podcast feed.